Hello there, everyone. It's been a bit of a while since I made the last video. Currently, I'm on vacation and pretty busy with just doing stuff, enjoying the company of friends, keeping tabs, and just writing everything about Aang. It's a fair bit of time, and also just answering everybody's questions on Discord and stuff. So I didn't really find myself a nice time frame where I'd sit down and just think about the recent stuff and talk about the list and etc. There's been quite some changes. I will go through them soon. Today, I have no necessary topic list for myself to kind of go about things. This is more of a wing it video with an emphasis on studying the addition of two cards that I think have a fair bit of potential, especially one of them, which is Savvy Trader. The ones who have been following my list probably have seen the changes, and my sincerest thank you if you're keeping a close eye on my list and thinking through the changes that I make and trying to make sense of what I am thinking with them and so on and so forth. I want to also showcase a nice shout-out type of a thing, because Play to Win did release an episode where Cam was playing my Aang list and had good examples of the polarizing gameplay experiences the deck can have. This is already very old, which actually in fact is 1 week, but in the grand scheme of things, I feel like even a week is so much time when I think about the deck list and evolutions and these kind of things. But I'm enjoying a warm cup of coffee, which will be drinkable soon. Right now it just came off the brewer, so it's hot. And it's raining outside, a bit of a thunderstorm, so very comfy weather. And yeah, but let's hop into it. The deck list itself, two major changes, I would say. I always update the picture in the deck list, or rather the banner, depending on what's the newest kind of addition or so to say. The list hit or went past 250 likes, which is awesome, as well as nearing the 20,000 views mark, which is crazy. So thank you everyone who's been following the project so closely. I found it kind of humbling towards my past self that I had written 50 pages of stuff already before the list had any set of eyes on it. It maybe had 50 views or something when I made the first video, and that just feels to me I don't know how I ended up in this project and this binge. Somehow it clicked and I just don't know what happened. I went with it, and well, shortcut to this date, many things have happened and it's pretty awesome. The deck list, the biggest changes here is cutting Safi and Melira for testing the slots of Savvy Trader, so this card, as well as Leonardo, which was in the banner already. So I guess we can talk about Savvy a bit before, because it's maybe a little easier. Both of these cards are kind of strange when we start thinking about them, but I came across this card and I didn't know this card even existed, but I was just looking at stuff I can't remember if my search was the reduced cost thing. I was looking at things which could be the second spell you cast each turn costs less, or something has Convoke, or third spell costs less. Third spell costs less would be fantastic for the list, by the way, which is kind of fun to think about. But that would basically enable many omni-centric lines, because usually the turn you cast Aang, aside from like turn 1 shenanigans, Aang is your first spell, and then second spell is Omni-Changeling, and then your third spell would be like something from Appa Airbend Exile, for example. But Savvy Trader, notably, it's mostly a hit off of Aang. So the second line of text is very similar to the familiar cycle. And when I was asked about this card, I just added it to the list without like saying anything. I've kind of switched over to an approach where like I explore things, I mention them on Discord, but kind of I go with the changes without like spoiling things too much beforehand. One reason for this is that generally I want to be more sure with some changes, because many people look at the list and many people copy the list and just play tournaments with it. So adding some cards, like even though I've had this tendency to just, kind of do whatever I tested crazy stuff and added them to the list, but I'd generally want to have good explanations for things and give some heuristics to go with them, because many things change this deck and how you're playing it in very, very drastic ways. For example, as an old like reference point, when I found the lines with Salvation Swan and added it to the list, suddenly the priority shifted quite drastically into wanting to prioritize on-ground continuers over like in-air continuers. So suddenly you wanted to find these effects like Felidar Guardian, Icewind Stalwart over Restoration Angel, for example, which felt really, really wild, because previously the main win lines were like Gigantoplasm and Jackdaw. Notably, along with this change, like Luminous Broodmoth was one of the things that made it further tip over to like the on-ground things, because now you had more creatures that cared about on-ground creatures compared to the ones that care specifically about flying. And to this date, it's still just Jackdaw for the flying ones, whereas on-ground specifically creatures are Salvation Swan, Luminous Broodmoth, and depends on the cards. Like, this depends on how you prioritize the continuers, but in a way also these complement Omni-Changeling as well. Of course, if the in-air continuer that you have is like a Spark Double, then you're probably just copying more creatures out anyway, and then you have these things, but we'll talk about Felidar Guardian more in a bit as well. And I think I should be probably doing a tier list update soon yet again, because I feel like many things change with just single additions to the deck, and Felidar Guardian with, for example, Savvy Trader and Leonardo in the list, suddenly Felidar Guardian is even better than it was. Or was before, rather, to be fluent in English, I guess. But Savvy Trader, this card, when I came across it, I was like, that effect is super interesting. Like the discount thing anywhere else. This is basically Doc Orlok, but this also affected your command zone. And I was like, wait a minute, like, this just seems really good. This also discounts casting from the graveyard. Obviously not that important on its own. The things that you'd be casting from your graveyard is basically just Mirror Hall Mimic, because of its disturb text, and when we think about, for example, Vizier of Many Faces, then Vizier doesn't get discounted because it's not a cast, it's an activated ability, the Embalm. But Savvy Trader has this first line of text, which is very, very, very cool. And it essentially says that when it enters, you choose a permanent card in your graveyard and you can play it. And what this means is that in the worst scenario, which is like the worst chains usually are not the ones where you fizzle immediately, but the ones where you hit one regular clone and then you fizzle after that. And these kind of these kind of chains mean that your Aang flips and you're stuck with this like backside Aang with no other creatures on the board and oftentimes no cards in hand either. But even in the worst scenarios, when we look at Savvy, you can exile that clone and now it costs one less and you can restart the chain next turn as well. So this card on its own serves a little like it has the same vibe as like Appa and even more so, I guess, Aang Swift Savior, because that only lets you do one thing. This does not, by default, let you exile multiple things. But this card I really, really like. And when I was being asked about this on Discord, I feel like maybe the focus on this card was a little off. Like maybe it was looked at from a viewpoint of like, yeah, this is a 4-mana discount effect that's really like costly, and also it just lets you restart the chain later, but it still costs like a bazillion amount of mana. But the curious thing about this card for me was that it's basically the only card, I think, that has both combo outlet like applications while also being a conditional continuer. And while there are some cards that do a similar thing, like for example, Gigantoplasm is something that qualifies as a continuer that has combo applications with it for single chain purposes, I guess. And if we look at cards like, I don't know, Renegade Rallier, that's another one that has some things and scenarios where it can be both. But generally, like, these kind of effects that are both a continuer and a combo enabler or outlet are just really, really valuable to have. And the reason why they are so valuable is that as the amount of chain continuers and the kind of reliability of your chain sustaining with this deck has gone higher, the more we can find effects that allow us to do the chain continuing aspect while also providing outlets to split the chain. So usually I refer, and the other Aang pilots refer it to as like chain splits, which generally is considered a win condition because the deck on average does not need more than 2 chains to win. And to be frank, I think the number currently is like 1.4, 1.3, somewhere around that mark. And this is without like me completely exploring Savvy and Leonardo either. So basically, these cards might increase that even further. But what Savvy functionally does is that it's an Omni-tutor gated continuer, which can also fulfill combo applications with cards like Appa, with the Renegade Rallier, with Phyrexian Metamorph, with Felidar Guardian, I guess. And this is mainly because if you're able to have Savvy Trader be a continuer and you're able to use a clone entering as a Savvy to continue your chain yet again, stacking up this discount effect can help you reach or have you end up in a scenario where your spells are reduced by enough to be able to cast things repetitively for free. So for example, Phyrex in Metamorph, if you have 3 of these out, then you just pay 2 life and pay 3 generic. At least I'm pretty sure it's because this just lets you play and then alternative casting cost. So if Convoke works, it should be the Phyrexian mana as well. But Savvy Trader, basically, find an Omni-Changeling, and now the curious part compared to the earlier stages was that now Savvy needs your Omni-Changeling to be in the grave. If you have no access to extra mana, then Omni is basically the only thing that you can use to continue your chain with this. There is one kind of a separate condition here, which is that if you have an LED start with Chameleon being discarded, then you have the Mayhem online. Now if you hit Savvy Trader, you can exile the LED from your graveyard, play that, and now your Chameleon Mayhem is reduced by 1 because it's still an alternative casting cost, and you can reduce that with the Savvy Trader's ability. So now you would be +1 mana, right? And this can lead to more outs, like whether it was Appa, whether it was cloning Savvy Trader again, and so on and so forth. But basically this card is conditioned to, it requires you to have access to the Omni-Changeling, whether that was discarded through an LED or you finding the Omni-Changeling and letting it die. And the other card is Leonardo. So Leonardo is super interesting. This card did not really make me that interested before I found the Omni stuff, because this card was essentially just a bit of a clunky Appa in a sense, where you would need extra mana to be able to cast stuff, and Appa was the same thing for me. Like before I thought about the Convoke stuff and the creature tutors, Appa just didn't fit the deck, because I wanted the deck to be as reliable as it can off of an Aang cast without access to anything extra. Now with the data I've collected, we all kind of know how often you have extra mana available and how much mana you have on average, depending on the turn you cast Aang. TLDR is that on the first turn it's much rarer, turn 2 it's more common, and then on turn 3 it's actually pretty common to have some extra mana. But Leonardo still felt awkward. Like it's a static Yawgmoth's Will for your clones, but you still need the mana to cast them. But now with the Omni-Changeling, Convoke works because you just can cast creature spells from the graveyard. And Convoke is a part of the card you that works with for example, Airbend Exile. This is probably known to you, whoever is watching this already, but similar to that, now if we have the Omni-Changeling in the grave, if we hit Leonardo off of an Aang trigger, we can convoke the Omni out. And you might ask, why is this important? Isn't this like similar to, maybe Eternal Witness? Because Eternal Witness would let you return your Omni-Changeling to your hand, and you could then convoke it out, right? But the thing with this is that it does have the finality counter application. But if you've been here for a while, if you've looked at the decklist, if you've watched my videos, if you've listened to me talk or read my texts on Discord, or if you've been coached by me, you have probably encountered kind of a key skill in the deck, which is resetting counters off of your creatures if it's beneficial for you. And this means that, for example, if you now convoke Omni out with Leonardo, sure, it has the finality counter on it, but if you have like Felidar Guardian around or a Flicker creature, technically actually with Omni, under normal circumstances, you can't Icewind Stalwart it either because it has Changeling, but basically, if you have Felidar Guardian, you can do the same counter reset thing as with Luminous Broodmoth, for example, or Salvation Swan, and now you can have it die and it won't be exiled. And the reason why this is good is that now if you have Omni-Changeling in your graveyard and you have enough creatures out, hitting Leonardo means that you can convoke out Omni, and ideally if you have the Felidar Guardian, you can now reset your other clones and the Felidar Guardian upright. They were tapped because of convoking, but you can flicker them upright, and then you can flicker your Omni-Changeling, comes back without the finality counter, and you can have it enter as Aang or another legendary creature that would let you continue the chain. And what this causes is that now you have a chain going on, but you also have access to the Omni-Changeling in your graveyard to be cast again with Convoke yet again, and you can reset the finality counter, and this way you can use Leonardo as a chain split. Now, something that I wanted to explore with this video is I just want to look at things and scenarios. I want to think about boards and combinations of creatures where I want to evaluate how often, for example, having the Omni go to the grave is beneficial compared to keeping it around for Appa. The surface discussion or the surface level thing is you have two creatures that care about Omni being in the graveyard, but you have only one that cares about it being in play. And this has so much nuance to it that I don't even know it completely myself, because when I started looking at things before making this video, I had a maybe 20 minutes, something like that, where I was answering someone on Discord who wanted to kind of pick my brain up about this Omni-Changeling heuristic thing where now I am challenging the old heuristics that I had, very, very similar to, I think it was Salvation Swan at some point, and then the Omni-Changeling Appa additions as well, where now things had fluctuated in value yet again. Some containers were better to find, some were worse, and so on. For example, Flash clones suddenly being better, because now if you had some way of going for an Omni-Changeling, then Appa, and then you convoke the Omni out, and if you have access to Flash clones, if you now were forced to go to your end step, maybe at your end step you have already airbent the Flash clone, and now if you hit some effect that lets you generate mana, you can now still play the flash clone, whereas otherwise you wouldn't be able to if it was just the regular clone out. Same principle as with Falaji Wayfarer, or Falaji, I'm not sure how it's pronounced correctly. But with that, like, Altered Ego suddenly was a better card, because if you airbend that with up and you continue your chain, and now you would find Falaji Wayfarer, you would be able to play the Altered Ego, whereas at a regular clone you couldn't. So this is kind of the pickle that I'm currently trying to disassemble, pick apart, and just like look at scenarios where one option is better than the other. In this scenario, keeping Omni around versus sending Omni to the grave. And I try to look at this from like a big picture kind of a viewpoint, and not necessarily like, oh gee, in this moment I guess this would have been better because now I hit up and I could have airbent it, or the opposite direction, but rather just like think about the settings and setups, think about the heuristics that I want to build for myself and for everyone who's watching and whoever is playing the list, because the better people play this list, the more joy it brings to me, the more people can learn. It's just like, it brings me so much joy, and it's honestly like really humbling when I start thinking about the extent of, I guess, this project. Like, this was a kind of a weird as, maybe even a fever dream at the start, where I just started doing some random stuff, honestly. Like, I had the stock list, and then I was like, what's wrong with these lists? And then I started trying things. Started looking at weird cards. Like, originally the cards that I was most interested about were the 2-drop doublers, which weren't ran as much even. Like, yeah, Safi was ran a bit, Melira as well, but like Angelic Renewal wasn't played. Then I found Renegade Doppelganger, for example. Birthing Ritual was super crazy, and then like Cream of the Crop happened. There's been a lot. Like, if I could, and if I had like the energy to do so, or somehow I could script the video together, edit a video, making this kind of a history of Turbo Aang video would be really, really cool to make, because there's like significant milestone points or waypoints where things evolved. Like, when we look at like history, then like, I guess Salvation Swan was the first really major thing, aside from like, well, I guess the 2-drop doublers actually were the one. And then I was like, what about more one chain win conditions? And then it's just kind of blown apart. But anyway, it is a video that I would be happy to watch myself. I love watching like summoning salts videos and other like history of certain things videos, where like evolutions in speedrunning and stuff is really interesting to follow. And for example, like one of the few gaming moments that I think have been the most rewarding for me have been, I almost always want to play games, want to watch series, want to watch movies without spoilers. I am pretty keen on going into things spoiler free. And I had this battle where I wanted to play Elden Ring, for example, very, very thoroughly and avoid spoilers, but I was also so interested to see the early stages of speedruns, the routes, and these kind of discoveries. And once I had completed the game, I went straight on Twitch to watch speedruns. Distortion was playing it, and I was there for many weird ass things that happened along the way. Like, Pegasus glitch was a big one originally, and just like these warp things and everything. Like, these things are just so cool. And I think many decks in cEDH don't really have that aspect where, like, most of the 100 card combinations we have in this format are like nuanced. They don't have that much significant depth to them because cards have to be really efficient by nature, and the function is what is kind of the key in them. For example, if we look at the traditional rock paper scissors aspect of cEDH, which is kind of like turbo mid-range stacks, this is something that I've talked about in my like video. I guess if you've actually watched this channel and you've seen my Finnish videos, like I made a lot of stuff for the Finnish community just to teach them about like theory in cEDH and stuff, and now it's just like English everything because this is more active for me, and I guess this is more what people kind of look for because I don't think anyone else can make this kind of I guess some could, but still knowing that most of the discoveries and like things I'm testing are in my head, in a way, like if somebody sees these cards, then sure they can cook and maybe figure them out better than I can, but there's so few people that would be talking about a single deck and single cards to this extent, I guess, aside from like other very, very tunneled projects where they're super keen on like evolving one deck and its cards throughout. But when we look at like functions in many decks are just like enabler. Like many cards can be just put into categories of like enabler and payoff and interaction overall. Like mana cards are enablers or however you want to label it, but many and most decks need some cards that like synergize with other, give you advantage in one way or another, and then like also the payoffs, like what do you do with X amount of cards in hand, what do you do with X amount of mana, and usually these are solved through either your commanders or just the inherent deck build when looking at, for example, like Rograkishai and these kind of decks that like no bad card skin, and where now you're relying more on like the heuristic-centric gameplay, the heuristic-centric meta, and the slop fests, where now you're looking to gear towards those by running an overabundant amount of free interaction, lots of pitch spells, and these kind of things, and you're kind of riding off of that amount of cards in hand turn into game actions, and now you get to play the game into your own win by doing that. And then there's like other decks that go about things differently, which is casting their commander and then seeing what happens, and so on and so forth. But generally, like when you look at the deck list and you open up and you see like what cards are being ran, it's quite hard to find cards that don't fulfill a certain category and they just look really weird. Like if we looked at some, I guess, stranger decks like Magda, for example, many of the cards that they can tutor out already have like, there's already the set bar for what are the best targets to find with a Magda. And usually these mean like if you're able to put 2 activations on the stack, then probably finding a combination of like an artifact dwarf and Clock of Omens or whatever. This is a good line of play, and then against like creature-centric boards, getting Portal to Phyrexia will likely lead you towards the win of the game, even if it doesn't win you the game outright. And same as like if you're playing against lots of Rograk Silas, getting Godfarer's statue usually wins you the game. But still, those things are like those kind of outlet things where these cards fulfill the same kind of a role. And within Aang, I guess this same concept could be looked at from the viewpoint of like White Plume Adventurer, for example. If you look at that card in the deck list, or if we looked at Thassa's Oracle in the deck list, we could kind of figure out that, okay, yeah, this is the thing that we will be looping. This is the thing that is the end state for the deck. This is the thing that will win us the game from infinite ETBs. For Magda, for example, we could look at the card that does nothing else, but it's just something that does damage to your opponents or whatever, which means that it's the outlet. And now, when looking at these kind of cards and effects, usually they don't dilute or like make your game plan and navigation different much at all. Like if we looked at Magda, usually you're still getting those effects through an Magda activation. So your game plan A is still to get that Magda activation. If we look at more standard 5-color, 4-color mid-range lists, your card choices are mostly like nuanced. If you're looking at amping up your mid-range value, like if you're looking towards playing a playfield where you want to be in a better position against like the other slow decks, then you usually it means that you're playing more greedy cards, you're playing more grind-centric effects, like other effects that let you draw cards, for example. I think a card that could be run in many more places is like Verity Circle, for example. If you're playing in a green field with mana dorks and stuff, now suddenly you're getting a lot of cards, and by including those cards, you have to cut something out. Usually it's the more narrow interaction, maybe proactive stuff that you could be using. And in these scenarios, it means that you're probably diluting your game plan to be worse against the fastest of the decks. For example, if you're cutting Dispel or like older cards that don't see as much play anymore, but like Spell Pierce, Miscast, for example, they were more prominent when like Ad Nauseam was the best card to play always. So these cards had like a higher value. But when we end up in these scenarios where those cards don't functionally change your gameplay that much, you have these effects. You have these cards that fulfill the same category. You increase your category of interaction against a specific playfield. Once you add the best cards that are universal, after that you need to stray down the path of like card quality. You either choose more narrow options, you choose options that are more costly or they require more like a higher amount of certain other cards to supplement it. For example, like Disrupting Shoal is a card that is very akin to this, because now you need a blue card to pitch, and this means that your blue card count needs to be higher, which obviously synergizes even further with running stuff like Misdirection and Commandeer, Copy Enchantment, Mirror Maiden. Like these fluctuating changes are very, very like interesting, but they are also explained much more easily. I chose to cut Mnemonic Betrayal because I don't expect to be playing against fast aggros as much, and I don't think that this card will be resolving in a solid way in the late game. Or in the late game I will already anyway have means to way, because usually in the end I would already have like Smothering Titan heuristic study out, so I can do whatever. But when it comes to this list, and I don't mean this like this whole section that I just talked about, I don't mean it in a way to like push other decks down in the format or anything like that, because I've played like everything. I've brewed so much like other decks. I've played more standard decks for years, and the like formula for them and the card functions are kind of easy. to figure out once you understand the basic gist of the things. And if you're very, very understanding of Aang, you probably can put this sort of a 1+1 like equation together and form your own like result of this thing, like Leonardo. Okay, it lets you play cards, but now the biggest thing, the most important thing, is to be able to combine that to Omni-Changeling and being able to cast that. Like there were some interesting YouTube comments. Something that I've also tried to do is just partake in less conversations in a way. The answers are out there for many things. Near folks, honest questions, I'm always happy to answer, and I also am not the best of like reading nonverbal communication, and if someone is saying something with tongue in their cheek, and usually that's why I just answer things like directly, and like if this was something that they were actually wondering about, this is the answer. And it costs me time and some effort, but still something to notice. Like I have been trying to when the play to win video, and now the other one that I'll show in just a moment were released. There's just a lot of comments and a lot of stuff that just tells you that it's not worth it. These people don't understand. They don't understand the functionality of certain cards in the deck. Like, just as an example, if you were to look at this deck list and open it up for the first time, and then you're like this Mirror Kinsmith, like what the hell is this card? You're playing a random common, it lets you find a mirror, and you don't have any mirrors in your deck. Like I think there was like a comment from like a mid-range Aang player or a Stacks player, and they were just commenting that like Cam shouldn't be playing this list, that it runs so many bad cards, and kind of it was a fairly long message, and I think I did answer something like from a statistic viewpoint, and just like in general showcase that my build is performing much better on average than other builds, and that is also with factoring in that those pilots are multiple. There's not just one pilot playing things. This was the case with, for example, Team Natana, aka with its old name Blood Pod, at some point, where it was quite literally just one person playing that. Same as a moment where Tevesh and Chrome was played as a Grixis mid-range option. This was after Displacer Kitten was released and Dockside was still legal, and there was like one player who was grinding it super much. And this obviously correlated with the stats. If that player is really fluent with the deck, if they are a really good player overall, now this deck has a very, very high percentage of winning, and like comparing it to other commanders, because there's just a smaller sample size, and that sample size is all done by a very good player. This is something that factors in when looking at stats for like the most played deck lists. Like years ago, I was playing Team. I honestly thought like Team Necrom was the best deck at that time, and that was because it was matched well against pretty much anything, and it was before like these Cradle Storm decks were seeing play. It was before somebody found Oboro Breeze Caller, and obviously Talon Gates of Madara wasn't out then. And like you just win, you just draw cards, you make sure that you don't lose. This was something that Brian Covell, for example, just highlighted when they won a cEDH tournament in the States, and it was just like their base idea throughout was that if you're tutoring a card, it's either Heuristic Study or Underworld Breach, which means that you're either set to win or you're still setting up. And the other point was that the longer the game goes, the happier Brian Covell was, because there would be more time in the game for them to affect the decisions and everything. And this is something that's true, like winning from an inevitability viewpoint. Now there's a widely bigger amount of decks and strategies that can go over the top of Team Nakram, like way harder. Just have more slop engines, more ways to convert mana or cards into game actions and so on. But I can't remember what the thing was I was talking about originally. But like these cards, these things, when people talk about the format and I guess decks, the best environments to talk about stuff and like improve is when you're talking with people who are like they are more deep into a hobby or a theory or like a deck, for example, in cEDH. They have more knowledge, they understand the deck better, and you can just like learn so much from this kind of an environment. And the other one is to like indulge yourself in play spaces and communities where you have like close to equally skilled players with you, because this means that there's more for you to learn. An analogy I've used in my work is that, for example, if you were to play football and you played against like there was a team of toddlers and like the best world's best team against them, neither side would learn anything. There's not enough capacity for the toddlers to learn, and obviously the world's best team wouldn't get enough of an opponent out of the other team, and this would not like serve learning in a way. And with this in mind, like if you're being always pushed a little bit to improve, you usually can understand how your decisions or actions were punished, like what was the vulnerability that your opponent could use against you. And I think this applies to cEDH as well. If you can't see the outcomes of some actions you made, which led to you losing the game or not winning the game. So for example, like you had a win available, but you made some choices along the way that made your opponents able to draw it. For example, like drawing your opponent's extra cards when they didn't need to do so. And like, just to kind of paint the picture, I guess. This is very brainstormy overall. Like, I didn't intend this video to be very, I guess, like coherent, but rather just this kind of a food for thought thing with obviously like actual Aang applications as well. I guess that's enough for our moment of just thinking and yapping. So we had this video. This one was really cool. So first there was a mulligan to 2. You should check this video. One land short, just needed to top deck a land and maybe could do something. Didn't find it in the end. And then the other game for Cam was a turn to Aang with a nice sequence of holding and sandbagging the LED, which is a decision to make. And here we see Charming Prince put on top and not Birthing Ritual, so playing around Volrath's Shapeshifter, which is nice. No other cards to discard, was it? No. And here we see a solid sequence where in the end Cam will be winning the game, but there were some things along the way that could have been done better. But let's look this chain through. So we do see a good setup for like resiliency. We have the Soul Herder here, hit the Icewind Stalwart, so Salvation's one options are online. Operative as Icewind Stalwart, currently no way to cast Omni, but still stacking up the on-ground creatures until you have a legendary clone is good to do. We get more clones, and now we do find a Restoration Angel, and here Cam does the correct thing, which is get infinite power on the Soul Herder. Notably here, it doesn't matter as much how many flying creatures you have, but you could have a split of like 2 flyers, 3 on-ground creatures. Doesn't really matter as much, but sometimes can matter for Jackdaw Savior. Then we find Gigantoplasm, and now here I commented on this like a lengthy message where overall Cam did a fantastic job. Like the deck is really difficult overall, and we see a lot of good heuristics here already. Like LED discard done correctly. We see a prioritization on Soul Herder, on Icewind Stalwart, for example, and then stacking clones onto the Icewind Stalwart. So all of this is good. Restoration Angel, we see infinite power on the Soul Herder. Everything is looking okay. But now with Gigantoplasm, something that if you're well versed with Aang, then you would know to reset this thing where you would have to do like you could have your Gigantoplasm enter as a Restoration Angel. Now you could flicker your clone or Vizier of Many Faces onto that Gigantoplasm. So now you have a Gigantoplasm Restoration Angel, and then you could use that one to blink your Icewind Stalwart, and then you could use your Icewind Stalwart to blink your Restoration Angel Gigantoplasm to hop over onto that Icewind Stalwart. And with this in mind, we could end up with a board where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, like including this one, 4 Gigantoplasm creatures with both setups available for Luminous Broodmoth and Jackdaw Savior available. But this is something that is not done here. Still, the win eventually comes from, let's see, we had the Felidar Guardian, and then we had some resetting done here, I think, which is good, better later than never. And I think it was Brenner that was hit here. Maybe Broodmoth, I can't remember which one it was actually. Let's see. Yeah, Brenner. So technically now you have already like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 creatures and 10 chains, so you just win here. But as we could see, development from opponents looking kind of scary, lots of mana, lots of permanents, Cabbage Merchant, blah blah blah, and you just play one spell and you win the game. Pretty nice, I would say. So this was a good showing for the deck, obviously, and it was nice that out of the decks, like by far the most people have watched and looked at Cam's Aang list and the heart for it. Obviously, it had been released before in the podcast episode, but this was really cool that Cam still has the link here to shout out my primer project, and that is cool. But on to the exploration part, I guess. So this is something that I had been fiddling around earlier. Earlier with, and I wanted to just like look at these setups where I want to see how often, like, how widely apart are the setups with like Appa and Savvy Trader and Leonardo, for example. And if we look at these as an end state thing, we can keep the mana engines here. But like, if we move these to the side and concentrate this being the cast, so the general good chain or the ideal chains are a combination of like Felidar Guardian and Sakashima the Impostor. Could be another legendary clone as well, but Sakashima is the best because it can be used beneficially due to its legendary creature type and it's sustaining it, when it comes down to like Omni-Changeling stuff, for example. And just to kind of showcase this, we find another clone, we would have it be a Felidar Guardian because it's the best option to do so. And then if we find Mirror Kinsmith at this stage, we can find Omni-Changeling. And then we would tap our things to convoke the Omni-Changeling out. We would have it enter as a Felidar Guardian, flicker this, and almost always the correct thing to do would be blinking your Sakashima, the impostor, up right here, because this allows you to airbend Aang if you were to hit the Appa, because then you essentially save like one untapped body if you need to use the Sakashima, whereas Appa entering, you'd rather exile the Aang than the Sakashima. So what you would do here is you would flicker these upright, and then with the grave setups in mind, what you want to do is have your Omni-Changeling enter as an Aang, so you can force it to die, right? You don't want to move the Sakashima onto the Felidar just yet, because then you don't have access to the blue mana that you would require for the Omni for Leonardo or Appa. There is a bit of a nuance here, I guess, also, which is that usually you'd be hitting a continuer of sorts. More often than not, it's a clone. And with a clone, you could, have it enter as a Felidar and move this back. So if you were to move Sakashima into a Felidar, and then you would have Omni enter as the Sakashima and a Felidar, you would end up in this scenario where you have 4 creatures untapped. But you don't have the second blue here, so if you were to hit Leonardo, you can't do that. But if you hit another regular clone, then you could transfer this back over here, and you could then continue shenanigans. Now let me think if it matters to have, like, I'm thinking about transferring the Sakashima, whether that is the correct thing to do. If we keep Sakashima as it is, the end state for us is like so. Now if we hit Leonardo, we can't convoke anything. If we hit Savvy, we can't Omni either. And if we hit Appa, Omni is already in the grave, so we basically always want to prioritize. Like in these scenarios, we're looking at getting Appa anyway. So with Savvy and with Leonardo, you need to hit another clone anyway. So I think obviously there's some like next turn applications where if you were to fizzle, then having these 2 untapped means that you can then convoke the Omni. But if the difference is like this, and we hit a regular clone, now we can just flicker this, and then we have this set up here. Whereas if we do this, we had this enter as the Sakashima, it dies, and flickers this one. We have 4 creatures upright anyway, and then we can move this over here. So we have 5 creatures untapped versus 4. Obviously this is the 5th, so I guess there is this small dance that you want to do. But notably this does not work with Chameleon in the same way. Let's see. So if you have Chameleon instead of this, then we do this, reset. And now the curious thing is that as like if we move this onto the Felidar Guardian, this Chameleon is not a legendary one. So we would have to do so that this enters as an Aang. And we would have 3 untapped creatures. We need to hit the clone. And if we hit the clone, then we can do the same thing here and set this up like so. And what is the other option? Hit the regular clone, flicker, flicker, flicker. So we have 4 here. So 4 that way. And the other way. Oops. I guess it's 4 like that if we want to transfer that over, and 5 if we do this. And if we don't move Chameleon back here, then the same scenario applies. This comes here. Yeah. But with Chameleon, the thing that I'm looking at is the stage where we have Leonardo out anyway. Well, let me just showcase this, I guess, a bit. So you find your Omni-Changeling, you get it out, you flicker these, flicker that, then Omni, Felidar, this enters as a Sakashima Omni, you flicker your Omni-Changeling, the Aang. I guess this is relevant actually for supportive parents, so that you have more untapped creatures available. I guess that can be relevant. But now if you hit the regular clone, you can transfer this over, so we are set for whatever. And now if you find Leonardo, what you can do is convoke the Omni out, reset all of these, reset the flying counter of your Omni, flicker your Sakashima the Imposter to enter as a clever impersonator, Felidar, whatever, and that you can flicker to enter as the Omni-Changeling. Oh yeah, we need the second blue creature actually here. That's curious. Let me think. So we can... I'm thinking if it's correct to still keep the Sakashima here. If the Sakashima was there, now we would have to do this. And we only have one blue thing. So if we now hit the regular clone, we can flicker Aang. And now we can convoke Omni out. Reset the Felidars. And blink Omni-Changeling to enter as either. So now we would need to hit the flicker here as well. Interesting. Yeah, this is something that I need to think about more. Like, obviously this becomes much easier if you have like a chameleon, for example, because you have more blue creatures overall. But there is a limit to how many things you can flicker upright. Like generally you would need 2 blue creatures. So you can convoke Omni out. And this means that you need to hit... I want to look at this with Sakashima. Because the easiest way to reset stuff is like this. And now if we were to Sakashima the Impostor this, now if we hit a clone, we need to get a second blue source, right? So we would flicker that over there. And now if we would fizzle, we fizzle. Then we would convoke Omni out, reset everything, reset the flying counter, the finality counter, blink the Sakashima onto here, and then, oh yeah, we can do so that this enters as a Sakashima Felidar and targets this Sakashima. So now if we hit a single clone, we can now reset this over here. So as long as you hit a clone or whatever continuer, we can do this again. If this sits on the Felidar forever, does anything change? You always reset these, and now ETB, if you move that, if we hit a clone, then we can do that. So it shouldn't matter. There, I think. You need 2 blue things anyway. And if you move the sucker, you need to hit the clone anyway. But yeah, still, this is like a very sort of like everything about this setup is the same as we want to do anyway. Like setting up for Salvation Swan, setting up for Appa and these kind of things. Now, I guess the interesting parts about Savvy Trader, for example, is that even if we don't have an Omni tutor, let's say Omni was discarded to LED, now if we were to hit the Savvy Trader here, notably we don't even need to have an extra clone. This works because it is discounted by 1. Now you would exile your Omni and you convoke it out for 4. You reset your Felidar Guardian. If we were to reset this into a Felidar Guardian, I want to think about this a bit. Felidar Guardian, reset it into this. We don't have the convoke field for the Savvy in this kind of a setup. So what creatures does it need? We need extra blue creatures, and we need to be able to get 2 of them upright. So we need to hit 1 clone in those as well. So let's act like it's like so. You exile that. Then Omni, do that one. Reset that onto this, and then you flicker Omni-Changeling into an Aang. And now, if we hit a regular clone, we can flicker, flicker, flicker. And now if we put this here, we need to find another clone. And if we do this, does a single clone, it doesn't let us do the blue one there. But let's act like it's this one, and then we can convert this to another chain yet again by doing this. Then there's also the weird scenarios where if you have like this kind of a setup, I guess, and you get this one, exile Omni, can do Omni-Changeling. Do you want it to die? Yes. So then if we have it this, we hit just regular clones. Eventually, if we just find enough clones, then finally we can just hit, make another Savvy Trader and exile the Omni again, I guess. But clones already continue the chain. Well, mostly it's like Appa-centric stuff here, I guess. Interesting. There are, I guess, also some weird scenarios where you could, if we've somehow discarded the mana vault, I guess, you could exile mana vault with Savvy and have mana available, but you need Appa out. But yeah, the interesting part, like with Savvy, sorry if this is like, this is very all over the place in a way, but this was something that I wanted to do just to kind of get my own head up to speed with. Like building the heuristics on how often, like, is it always correct to send it to the graveyard? Notably, you always shuffle your deck if you like use the Omni tutor. This was something that someone asked and was like, if we haven't yet bottomed any of those three, what should we be doing? But overall, it doesn't matter because we are going to be shuffling in between. But going Omni into the graveyard means that there's one additional outright continuer, which is Savvy, which is usually pretty easy to, I guess, the condition to satisfy. And the conditions are very similar to Appa. Because if the chain has been, without Felidar Guardian, if the chain has been something like this, you find that to the hand, and then tap. Keeping it around means that you still need to hit one thing in between for Appa to work. Because now you would be airbending this, and then you could convoke it from these two. So minimal creature count, letting Omni die, means Appa is online. If you hit Savvy here, you cannot continue. How many more things do you need for it to be online? You need 3. And if you get a Felidar Guardian, things get easier. Or Icewind Stalwart. Or Restoration Angel. So basically, the only outright thing means that then Appa is online. Something that I want to kind of explore as well is, does this change if you have extra mana available? If you have extra blue available, then I think Savvy and Leonardo get so much better overall. Appa obviously is really, really strong as well, but like if you haven't found Omni-Changeling, then Savvy is a continuer with extra mana available. Appa is a continuer with extra mana available. Leonardo is likely a continuer with extra mana available. But with extra mana, I think Savvy Trader is just so good because you can hit those thresholds where you can cast things for free pretty much. Yeah. Let me see, what was I writing earlier? I had a thing I wanted to look at, and it is, oh, these were condensed. I need to add the space breaks. Leonardo. Yeah, so one of the infinites, I guess, with Omni is like such. So your chain would be this, ding dong. Find that, get your Mirkin Smith. Tap these, flicker, flicker, flicker. Oops. And I think the consensus here was that we need a second clone anyway, so now you would blink this onto the Sakashima to blink this one. So we have that one online. Now if we hit Leonardo, yeah. No, we need the blue creature, yeah. We need one anyway in between. So now you would transfer this over there. And now if you hit Leonardo, we can convoke this out, reset all of these. Then you move this over here. Have this enter. I'm thinking if I missed the Blumena thing when I earlier looked at this thing. Yeah, I think the Blumena was something that I looked over here. But basically, as long as you just hit the clone, you can flicker that and then you have the condition satisfied. If this is, however, a chameleon, then something changes a bit. You need a clone anyway, so we can do this and then flicker this one onto the Aang. Let it die, find a clone, flicker this over there, I guess. So do we even want to change this? Yeah, you need to get 2 clones here. So after doing that, Leonardo, and now three convoke out the Omni, reset finality of it. Yeah, so this one does not let us go infinite. But it is very, very close. Something that changes here also is that if the chain consists of Renegade Rallier and you have the LED, so let's act like the chain has been flesh duplicate, send it to the graveyard, and then you find, for example, Chameleon. Maybe we can use the Sakashima I used earlier as well. Hit Felidar, Renegade Rallier, enters as that. And now if you find this feller, we can find Omni, convoke out Omni as a Felidar Guardian, blue mana. I guess we move this over here and then you flicker this one here anyway. Now if we hit a clone here, you could bring out the flesh duplicate and then untap so you have more bodies available, but here if we hit Leonardo, we already have the condition satisfied. So now we can play these things from our graveyard. So what you can do here is convoke out the Omni and do this dance with the Felidar Guardians. So now these are off. So what you can do now is transfer the Sakashima over onto the Felidar and have Omni-Changeling enter as the Sakashima, dice to legend rule, and this flicker will target Renegade Rallier. ETB return LED, you crack it for 3 blue, and now you use 2 blue to cast the flesh duplicate, reset its counter off of itself, and now finally have it enter as the Sakashima, the impostor, and Now the Felidar trigger target Renegade Rallier, bring this out, crack it for 3 blue, use 2, do the dance with these, enter as this, flicker the Rallier, and this way you can generate infinite mana, and you can then cast things infinitely with Leonardo. Now, something that I wanted to think about as well was the mana vault setups, where like if you have a Felidar Guardian and you have a mana vault, but no Renegade Rallier, for example, if this has been the starting point here, enters as that and dies, goes like so. Then we hit a clone of sorts, and then we can flicker this over here. Now, what happens if we find Leonardo? Can we do something with the colorless mana? I guess we necessarily can't, I think, unless our clone is Phyrexian Metamorph. So if we have found this card, say it's like that, and now we flickered into this, now we could do 5 for Omni-Changeling, reset all of those upwards, Sakashima into Felidar, Felidar into an Omni, and then Omni enters as Sakashima Felidar, this dies, and oh yeah, we need to kill the Phyrexian Metamorph actually, not this one. Here if we find, I guess if we find one clone in between, then we can do Omni again, but what if, interestingly enough, we would do Phyrexian Metamorph and let it die. 0 chains currently, and we have Mana Vault. If we play this, so we can, basically we can do 2 life or 1 additional thing where we get some ETBs, but it doesn't do anything. But with Savvy Trader, let's go like that for a bit. We find Omni-Changeling, we reset those. Then enter this dies. And then we flicker that one. Now if we find Phyrexian Metamorph, Felidar Guardian, transfer this over there. And if we now hit Savvy Trader, we exile the Omni-Changeling. We do 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess. Doesn't matter. For Omni-Changeling, reset those. And now if we flicker the Sakashima onto a Felidar Guardian, and now Phyrexian Metamorph gets blinked, as a Sakashima the Impostor. Now we need to get mana somehow, I think. Because we need +1 mana. So with just this setup, I guess we could let this one die. And now if we then flicker Aang, and then we have another chain with now Omni still on the battlefield, I guess it doesn't matter, we could have let this die as well. And now if we enter the scenario where we now hit a clone, we can now flicker the Mana Vault, and now we can do this float 1 mana. Float 1 mana, can we do something curious here where flicker, reset everything, Sakashima here, and then we need to make this one die. Yes, so we have this one enter as Sakashima the Impostor, Felidar Guardian, let it die, and this one targets this one with Felidar. Now we float another one, reset, dies, untaps. So yeah, now we have infinite metamorph casts, yes. And with infinite metamorph casts, we have infinite mana, and with infinite mana, or infinite colorless mana, we can cast this infinitely and flicker one of our lands, if we have any. Yeah, so that one is pretty nice as well. Same applications for Renegade Rallier as well. Sakashima is good in here because you can force the death with the flicker as well. I think that's very key here. But I guess this was a bit of a ramble end state for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video still. This is something that I still need to like explore myself. Notably, just as I mentioned, like I guess it's important to show the basic things with like Savvy Trader, I guess. If you hit this setup for the Omni and flicker, move this here, flicker that, this one dies. And now if you hit the regular clone, and when you do this, if you hit Savvy, you convoke your Omni out, you do these flicker things, and then this one here, and then let this one die, while flickering this one over here. If you hit Appa here, even if this is in the graveyard, Savvy notably says that it's from anywhere. So basically, if you're able to clone your Savvy here, for example, I guess we would need the extra blue here for like one clone after, but now with one discount, you could convoke this out into the Savvy Trader, and now you have 2 discount for the Appa. So this was one of the applications like Savvy can bring back the Omni-Changeling, and now if you're able to untap these 2 and you hit, you're able to get the Savvy Trader again, then it's really nice. And with, I guess, Savvy Trader on the battlefield, you generally want to keep the Omni-Changeling out, because now Leonardo is basically... I still need to evaluate this a bit. Appa is really easy to convert into a win. Like you have the infinite on the board. Leonardo, you don't, right? Anyway, long video, lots of thought processes and rambles. Stay tuned for next videos. Tournament results in the next video, and today more tournament stream. Yesterday we did have like a mid-range Aang play on stream. I can't remember what the tournament is called, but keep an eye out for it. Thanks for watching, have a nice summer, and see you guys next time.